We are born free.
And we will die free.
The time in between, though,
that's complicated.
In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Odermatt.
Welcome to another episode of Finding Freedom here on the Lions of Liberty Network. And I have a great guest to introduce here in just a moment. Before I do that, just want to remind everyone listening, if you're listening to this or if you're watching it, and if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe in podcast form on whatever app you're listening on or on YouTube. We're up to almost 7,000 subscribers, but for some reason, our numbers are not anywhere close to that. So make sure to hit that bell on your YouTube if you are watching on YouTube, or find us on Rumble. That channel is growing as well. My guest today is Teresa Mull, and we're going to be talking about wokeness. She has a book coming out called Woke Proof Your Life, and we'll talk about that, and we'll see where else the conversation takes us. So Teresa, welcome to Finding Freedom.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Great to have you here. And I understand that you, I think you grew up not too far from where I live. I'm just south of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, and you grew up in the Allegheny Mountains of Pennsylvania. So what part of Pennsylvania, what part of the Allegheny Mountains was that?
Yes, I'm right in the heart of the state in Center County, literally the center of the state. I'm not too far from State College, which is where Penn State is. And basically, our only claim to fame is State College, Penn State. If it weren't for that, we would really be the middle of nowhere, which I'm fine with. It's the Pennsylvania wilds, and it sounds romantic. It's a bunch of hillbillies, and it's awesome.
Yeah, well, that's where I went to college at Penn State, so I know the area.
Okay.
Well, I'll actually be in State College this weekend. My wife and I met at the Arts Festival a long time ago, 2009. So we go back every year for the Arts Fest, which is
fun.
Which is a fun time.
Yeah.
So Pennsylvania, you spent some time in Idaho, right? So what took you out to Idaho?
Yeah, so I grew up here in this little town, and I was really eager to get out, spread my wings. I felt suffocated by the small town. I thought I was too good for this place. I was going to go see the world and be successful and famous and all those things. So I went to school in Dallas, Texas, big city. Wasn't a huge fan of that. Came back to PA for a few months, and then I landed in Washington, D.C. I did a few internships there, and really got disenchanted by the big city. Turns out I'm not a big city girl. I'm not really a city girl at all. So I was looking for my next place to go, and I decided I wanted to live somewhere beautiful, somewhere that I would want to vacation to, because why not live in a vacation land? So I applied to a few journalism jobs in places that I wanted to live. And I ended up in Idaho in Teton Valley, right on the other side of Jackson Hole. And it's beautiful and lovely, and I had a great time. But I got homesick. My family and my parents are here in central Pennsylvania, and I moved back here, and I became re-enchanted, fell in love with my hometown all over again. I was only going to stay here for like a couple months before I decided on my next place. And that was like 6 years ago. So I'm here to stay. I put down roots, and central Pennsylvania is great, but don't tell anyone, because it's a good secret.
It is. It is pretty great, and people forget about Central PA because you have Pittsburgh and Philadelphia on each side, and people forget there's a middle part there. When I tell people when I'm traveling then from Pittsburgh, like, oh yeah, that's pretty close to Philly, right? Not really. It's about 6 hours away, but
yeah, they say Pittsburgh's on one side, Philly's on the other, and Kentucky's in the middle. So I'm from the Kentucky part of Pennsylvania, which is a compliment. It's not flyover country. It's like drive-through country, basically. You go on I-80, you go through here, but yeah, we like it that way.
Yeah, definitely beautiful country to drive through. So so you said you spent some time in DC. What was that like, going from a small town, Pennsylvania, to being in, the belly of the beast in Washington, DC?
Yeah, I was really taken in by it all whenever I first went there because, I was young, impressionable. There's lots of powerful people around. You'd see these people that you'd see on TV just walking around the Capitol, and the Supreme Court's there, all these impressive things where the laws are made. So I was pretty enchanted by it for probably about a year. I made a lot of really valuable connections that I still have. And uh, you might not be surprised to learn that the conservative social scene, I guess, the conservative world's pretty small and
Hmm.
tight knit in DC. It tends to be because we're pretty outnumbered. So it was pretty easy to make some good friends that I still have. But you can feel the corruption there. Power corrupts, and that's very evident in DC. So
Yeah.
it's a neat place to visit. My brother still lives there, so I go down there every now and then, but I try to avoid it. There's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of crime now. It's getting to be pretty dangerous, but it's an impressive place. There's cool things to see and do, but I can't really be there for more than like 48 hours now.
It's probably it's like going to Vegas. You don't want to stay in Vegas for more than 48 hours. Don't want to be in DC for more than 48 hours. It's a
Right.
good time
Yeah.
frame, probably.
Hmm.
So now you're the assistant editor of the Spectator World, which is or you're also a policy advisor for education at the Heartland Institute and a part-time editor of the Philipsburg Journal. And I talked about your book that I think comes out next month, Woke Proof Your Life. So how did you, first of all, wokeness, it's everywhere. Those of us in the freedom, conservative, libertarian movement, I think we noticed it more than anyone else. What inspired you to write a book that is, well, we'll get into what you talk about in the book, but that is focused on wokeness?
There are a few things. I talk in the book about just noticing so much anxiety and stress and misery, and just the way that people treat each other now as opposed to when I was a kid, or even opposed to like 3 years ago, pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when I was growing up, everybody was pretty patriotic. We had our differences. Democrats, Republicans have been arguing forever, but we pretty much, we had more in common than not. And we all wanted the same general things for the country. We all had the same basic Judeo-Christian values, and something shifted with the rise of wokeness. Um, and I just noticed so many people seem miserable, and the way we treat each other is not so much as a neighbor, as a fellow patriot, as a fellow American, that sort of melting pot mentality, but more as
Mm-hmm.
what can I get from that person? What sets me apart? We're really focused on our differences now and how we can basically use one another for self-service, to serve ourselves. And I really don't like that attitude. I don't like that mindset, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
like what it's doing to our country. So I wanted to get to the bottom of how we got this way and how we cure it. Because I want to live in a society that's happier and healthier and holier and just a nicer, a more pleasant place. I'm sick of the frustration and the anger that seems to be everywhere. And so my goal was to diagnose that. And something else that happened to me, I bought a bottle of shampoo and I took it home. It was my favorite. It smells delicious. And I looked down and there's a rainbow flag on it. I'm like, really? Can you even buy shampoo? Like, is nothing
Yeah.
sacred? Is nothing safe? I'm like, what does this have to do with gay people? So it was several things that all came to a head, and I put my finger on it. I was like, it's wokeness. That's what it is. So that's what inspired me to write this book. I diagnosed, I guess, our problem, or the name of the problem now is wokeness, which encompasses a lot of things, but I wanted to dissect it. I wanted to give people pointers to make them better able to recognize what the woke weapons are, and then to combat them, and then also to avoid wokeness. You don't always
Mm-hmm.
have to punch back. Sometimes you can step out of the way. And I find that that's something that the woke warriors really hate. If you ignore them,
Mm-hmm.
they get really high off of agitating people and making us all upset and angry all the time. And we don't have to be that way. We can stand up for our beliefs and be firm and stand our ground and hold our values, but we don't have to be mad all the time.
Yeah. Something you talked about at the beginning there. I was visiting some friends last weekend, and sitting around the table, myself, I guess I consider myself a conservative libertarian. I really don't like labels at all anymore. But and I would say the other people there is a progressive, a moderate, somewhere in between that area. And one of them was talking about that, their son is a big Joe Biden fan. He's he's like 10 years old, and kids get into, politicians or the president, and they have no idea like what any of it means. They can't understand it at that age. I mean, it's crazy that we say they can't understand, who the president is or what the policies are, but yet there's people out there who think that somebody who's 9 or 10 years old should be able to change their gender. But anyway, maybe we'll talk about that later. But my friend was saying that she had to have a discussion with her son about like, well, when you're going to this camp, you got to make sure that you don't talk about Joe Biden because there's going to be Trump supporters there. And, people might get angry with you. There could be a fight. Like, and then we started talking about like, how weird is that? Like everyone at the table recognized it, all from different sides of the, political spectrum. That is so like not normal compared to like our childhood growing up. Like, sure. Like growing up. Yeah. I think when I was a little kid, maybe I liked like George H.W. Bush, the older Bush. Because I kind of grew up in that movement. I remember my dad was a fan of him. Like, I can't imagine like my dad giving me that talk saying like, when you go to camp, don't mention George Bush because there could be a Bill Clinton supporter there who like might want to fight you. Like, what is even happening right now that our kids even have to think about this stuff? It's completely insane. And it has penetrated like every little nook and cranny of our lives. But I didn't really have a question with that, but I will follow that up with a question now. So when we try to define wokeness, because it seems like it's almost everywhere, like I just talked about, do you have like a definition for it on what it is, or is it too large to define?
No, I have a definition in the book. It's basically a socio-political ideology that is characterized by the manipulation of noble goals that radical left-wing zealots use to control and destroy America. So that's the larger definition. But put more succinctly, I've been saying that it's basically political correctness on steroids. So a lot of the concepts we see of wokeness, they have been simmering for years. We had gay marriage, we've had we've just seen it overturned, but affirmative action was kind of like diversity, equity, and inclusion. But then I think I really blame COVID and the advent of the isolation crisis and the loneliness and the screen time, and people were basically locked at home absorbing all of this propaganda. And I think that's really whenever wokeness took hold and the gloves came off, and all of a sudden, like now we're discussing what is a woman. Like, we didn't have this 3 years ago. We've always had problems. We've always had evil. We always will, but it's taken on a new radical turn. So wokeness, the left likes to say like, oh, you can't even define it. You don't know what it is. They purposely make it vague. They purposely use these easy breezy terms like diversity, equity, inclusion, environmental, social governance, and positive things too, like Black Lives Matter. Like who's going to argue with that? Of course, Black Lives Matter, but they're really smoke screens for much more sinister goals and objectives. I tell people to look at, it says in scriptures of the false prophets, by their fruits you will know them. So it might say diversity, equity, inclusion, and love is love, and having rainbows and all these parades and things, and it might look positive, but look at the fruits. Look at our society. You can even send a kid to camp without giving him a lecture first about talking about politics. It's everywhere. I remember whenever it was considered rude to talk about politics and religion, and now it's all in your shampoo bottle. You can't go anywhere. It's nearly a sin of omission not to bring up some sort of radical social cause with every single thing you do. You have to have a rainbow flag on your porch. You have to talk about diversity. My local bank, this little tiny family branch bank, has DEI stuff on their website, like next to the mortgage applications. I'm like, really? It's everywhere. It is everywhere. But I will let you speak now because I'm ranting.
No, that's great. And I want to talk more about, diagnosing what wokeness is and what aspects of our lives and how it's affecting us. But I do want to talk about solutions too, because you do have some solutions in the book. But you did talk about, just now, how after COVID, more people are anxious, depressed. We have this epidemic of overdoses that are occurring. And I think there's a misconception with overdoses that people think those are people that are like trying to commit suicide. Like the vast, vast majority of overdoses are unintentional overdoses. They're not people who are intending to kill themselves. But with all of this stress that is just it seems like it's inescapable in our lives. And I think, like as you talk about in the book, what plays into it is social media and this addiction to screens, right? So my question is, because we are so, screens are such a big part of our lives. For example, for me, for my day job, I work remotely. I have to be looking at screens all day. And I'll fully admit I do have an addiction to my phone, which I'm trying to break. But how much of this is just of wokeness is just what society, like the choices we've made as a society to enable a lifestyle where we are always giving attention to something. Like how much of it is caused, is self-inflicted by the decisions we've made as human beings?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is our faults. I'm guilty of all of these things too. I use my phone too much. And I think that we have sort of been lulled into the ease, that luxury of doing things instantly, click, click, and 2 days, 1 day later, your groceries arrive on your doorstep because you have
Mhm.
Amazon Prime or whatever it is. You can order from Grubhub, you can do all these things basically instantly. And our lives have become so easy and we've become used to that. And then we have a lot of free time, quote unquote, but for some reason, everybody seems really busy. Everyone's always stressed out. I'm like, why are we more stressed out now than whenever we had to like hitch up the mule and pray for rain and like plow the field and pray that like we had enough grain to last us all winter? Like I'm sure it was stressful back then, but it seemed almost more controllable because you were dealing with the physical real world and nature and cycles and natural things. Now you're dealing with technology and the World Wide Web and all these forces that are coming into your world that you can't really control, all these internet strangers, all this news that doesn't really affect you. It affects your psyche, but you're just always being scared. You're always on edge. You're always having this fear enter your home and your mind, and it really wears you down. It burns you out. So I refer to this as unforced stress in the book.
Mhm.
If you're familiar with tennis, there's something known as an unforced error, which is basically when your opponent doesn't do anything tricky or skillful, you just mess up on your own. You just hit the ball into the net because you messed up. So I think that's a lot of what we're doing to ourselves. We have allowed these novel inventions, cell phones, screen time, streaming services, all these things that can be very good and they're positive and they're beneficial if they're used properly, just like anything. But
Mhm.
we have to really guard our senses and make sure that we're using these amazing resources as resources and not recourses. We've all been there. We have 5 minutes to spare standing in line at the post office. We whip out our phone. We look at TikTok. We read some woke article. Because we get a ding on our phone and CNN alerts us to it, or whatever it is. So if we're really cognizant of how we're spending our valuable time, we only have so much time on this earth. We all have talents and skills. We all have beautiful people in our lives that we're probably not talking to enough, not paying attention to. We all have neighbors, people we sit next to in a restaurant that we could strike up a conversation with, make a new
Mhm.
friend, or learn something interesting, make their day. We're not very good at using our time. We're filling our time, but are we using it wisely? I don't think so. Not most people, and we can all do better. So those are some of the things I outline in the book. I really hammer away at technology and how it's really taking over our
Yeah.
lives and consuming us and distracting us from bigger, better things.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, when you talk about getting sucked into your phone and sort of this addiction to outrage, and it's not only like just coming outrage, being outraged at things you see from the left, like when you see a gay pride parade with men parading around with their, with their private parts out. When you see something like that, you become outraged, right? But there's also like the outrage that comes from seeing the conservative side of it or libertarian side exposing this for what it is. And it just becomes this, outrage back and forth. And I was having a conversation with a friend earlier on Twitter this past week about like, sometimes you do need to even, block some of these accounts like the libs of TikTok who might be doing good things by bringing this like to the forefront. But if you're seeing that like constantly in your feed and it's making you upset because you're seeing it, that's not serving you. It's acting as a stressor, as you're talking about this like unforced stress that you're just letting come into your life. So, yeah, I think it's really important to even people who might be doing good things, like Libs of TikTok might be a good account by exposing these things. It doesn't mean you need to see it all the time if you're already
Right.
aware of it.
We kind of get the point. Like, the woke playbook, what they're doing, they're out there. But then I think there is a tendency to a lot of conservatives, and I've seen this with my own friends and family. They get kind of addicted to that high. It's like they're going to war every day. It's almost like playing a video game, but it's like with trolls on the internet or something. And you're not, pray for discernment, but sometimes a lot of these people, you're not going to change their mind. They're not interested in the truth and they don't even believe in it. A lot of the times they're just saying woke talking points because it's going to get them tenure at some liberal university, or it's going to get them a pay raise, or whatever it's going to do. They don't actually believe that men can give birth. They don't actually believe that it's fair that a man should be swimming on the girls' swim team. They're just saying these things because it gets them notoriety. It gets them to be liked or whatever they need. So that's the point I make in the book too, is discerning when to shake the dust from your feet. And, there are a lot of lost souls who are taken in by wokeness. There's been a big decline in the number of people who believe in God and who believe in Christianity. And whenever you take that away, the void is filled by something. So there's a lot of people who are being filled by wokeness, and they believe the talking points. How can you disagree with love is love? How can you disagree with diversity, equity, inclusion? They all sound like really positive, good things. Until you pull back the curtain and you see what they actually mean and what they actually do and what their fruits are. So you have to take into consideration if the argument you're having and the rage you're having is to a purpose, if it's effective, and if not, it's just a waste of time and you're just fulfilling some emotional outlet for your own self, and that's not a good use of time either.
So how do you think we should be responding to wokeness? Not only just responding, but how do you think as individuals and as families and communities, how should we respond, but also help others to not run into the same issues of, getting these unforced stresses?
Mm-hmm. I make the analogy of woke proofness as being waterproof. So I don't want people to think that I'm advocating for sticking our heads in the sand and ignoring it and just acting like it doesn't exist, because it does exist. And it's very loud and they're very well funded, but they are still the minority. If you look at statistics and you look at what happened with the Bud Light controversy, the Dodger Stadium thing with Target, it seems like every time something radically woke happens in corporate America, they just get destroyed by Americans who are like, I'm done with you. I don't care. So those are really positive signs that we're winning this battle and that truth and sanity is still on our side. So keep that in mind. But back to the waterproof analogy, whenever you have something that's waterproof, like an awesome Gore-Tex jacket or some welly boots that are waterproof, or a really great umbrella, it makes it so that you can go out into the storm and you're still in it, but you're not getting wet, right? So whenever you're woke proof, you're putting on basically armor of virtue, of truth, of knowledge, of understanding, of peace, first and foremost, of trust and hope in God. And you are armed with all of these things that make it so that wokeness won't make a dent in you. And not only are you personally and spiritually ready to confront wokeness and go live in this woke world and be perfectly fine and protect your family at the same time, but you can spend your time better too. Because I advocate also for obviously less screen time, but whenever you have more free time because you're not agitated by all this stuff, you can cultivate hobbies, you can volunteer, you can bring back traditions that remind us as Americans of what we have in common and what made and still makes our country great. Go have a backyard picnic and invite over your neighbors. Go to the church softball game on Sunday and just leave your phone at home and just have a good time enjoying people, because what wokeness wants to do is divide us and isolate us, and that's how they conquer us. They make you feel like you're the only one. But that's only really on the internet, as far as I can tell. I mean, there are certain pockets where, certain parts of basically big cities and very liberal places where wokeness is thriving. But for the most part, people aren't that way, and they don't want to live that way. And they're getting frustrated with it. They don't want to fight anymore. So if you go out and live in the real world, and you realize that, you're not going to go to the local coffee shop and someone's going to say like, oh, I identify as non-binary and I'm a cloud, and also, I'm indigenous, person of color, whatever. Like, I don't know. I don't really find that happens. I just find that, you see someone, you smile at them, you strike up a conversation, you have a nice time. And we need to get back to that, like get back to reality, not all this nonsense that's going on online.
Yeah. Get back to talking to regular people. Like, we had a 4th of July party this past week at our house, and the day before and the 3rd, I was getting in arguments on Twitter, and I'm like, what am I even doing? And I'm like, I cannot wait to just talk to regular human beings in person tomorrow. And I mean, we need that. And I think having this lockdown period where we were forced to quarantine our house and we couldn't see our friends and family. I think people really have some trauma from that they like haven't fully gotten back to it, because you need that connection, that human connection, in order to deal with everything else we have in today's world. And I also think it's interesting what you talked about. There has been a pull that I've noticed, at least, from people who previously were not Christians, did not attend church. I think with the lockdowns and with what's happening in the aftermath with the wokeness, I think more people are seeing something's going on here and being pulled to the church. Maybe the numbers still are, not where they were 20 years ago, but I do feel like more people are understanding, there's more to this than just the material world that I'm seeing that's happening around me. I don't know if you've noticed anything similar in your life, but I think it is something that's happening. Is that something you have noticed?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of a silver lining, because, these people can push wokeness all they want. They can push, solutions, quote unquote, to people's misery, but nothing is going to replace what has been naturally put in us by a creator who is wise and knows what he's doing. There's no substitute for that. There's no substitute for nature and for the rules of creation. So I think people have been charmed or enticed over to the woke side, but then they get there and they're like, wait, I'm not happier. I'm not, I'm free to be me. I'm getting transgender surgeries, or I'm taking Ozempic instead of just taking a walk in nature, or, I'm speaking my truth, but they don't find that that's satisfying, because it's not the truth, and it's not the way that humans were made to operate. What we need to get back to are the things that have sustained us since humans were created, and get back to our purpose. We've forgotten what we were made for, which is to love God and serve him in this world and be happy with him forever in the next. And that involves, serving our neighbors and being good, loving, serving Christians. And if you get off that path, you're not going to be happy, even if wokeness
100%.
says they have the answer. So I think, I think people, the more miserable they get, the more they're starting to question, like, wait, I make the analogy in the book of like, free mattress on a billboard, and people drive by it every day, and they like go to the store to get the free mattress, and they didn't realize there's like terms and conditions, and they didn't read the fine print of wokeness, which is like, oh, by the way, but you'll also be miserable, and all these things. So
yeah, famous Satanist Lester Crowley said, "Do what thou wilt," in so much of our culture today. And so many of our, musicians and famous celebrities out there are followers of Lester Crowley, and they idolize him. And this is what you see come across in our culture. Do what you want to, as long as it feels good, do it. But it's empty, because it's not the truth. And when the truth is not behind it, you're not going to be fulfilled. And that's ultimately, what we're here on this earth to do, is to follow Jesus Christ. I did want to ask you about, you talked about public schools a little while ago, or maybe something tangentially related to public schools and made me think of public schools. But I am kind of torn on this. My wife and I have a daughter. She's 8 years old, so going into second grade. And last, kindergarten, first grade, she was in our public schools. And we do live in a pretty conservative area, but it's getting to the point as you get up in grades here where they're going to start teaching, teaching anatomy and sex ed and all of that stuff. And are they going to start teaching that, men can be women and women can be men? And at a certain point, yes, I grew up going to public schools, and, you want to be able to arm your child to have the understanding to navigate that, because when they get older, they're still going to deal with that. If they work at a corporation or they own a business, they're going to be dealing with people who came up through public schools. And I spend a lot of time in the libertarian community, and the libertarian answer to this question is, well, just homeschool. I'm just really not satisfied with that answer, because you still have the rest of the kids going to public school, and that's affecting the culture as well. So what are your thoughts on the homeschool, public school debate to respond to wokeness?
Yeah, I wanted my book to be for anybody in any situation to be able to find some solutions to fight wokeness. So I do have a lengthy section on homeschooling and how various parents in various situations have done it. I have a section on private schools. A family I know, they started their own school because they were dissatisfied with their local school. I have a section on charter schools, which are technically public schools. They're free. They're tuition free. So I have a section on that. And then I also have a section on public schools, because sometimes maybe you don't have the option to have any of those other education choices. So the section on public schools is about educating your child before and after they go to school, to be vigilant, to know exactly what they're learning, to look at their books, to work through it with them, kind of to re-educate them, maybe uneducate them a little bit after they've been through the ringer of public school, if they are being exposed to liberal stuff. The woman I quote in the book sends her kids to a public school in Seattle, and she's a very conservative mother, very traditional. And I can't imagine what her kids are being exposed to, but she assures me that, and the advice that she gives in the book is that if you are vigilant, your kids are going to be exposed to that. They're probably being exposed to it on TikTok. Just even if you send them to a private school, or even if you homeschool them, they're going to encounter it maybe on TV. If you take them to a restaurant, they might see something, hear something. So you do your best. I advise parents to consider homeschooling, send them to a private school, to a charter school, something, so that at least they're in a more wholesome environment if they can. But if that's not an option, yeah, you can be a vigilant parent. I have a friend who makes sure that every morning and afternoon when he picks his kids up from school, that what they're listening to as soon as they get in the car is something conservative and something with values, so that whatever happened in those 7 or 8 hours in between, that at least he's filling up the rest of their time and making sure that he's talking to them and making sure that they have a proper understanding of the world.
Yeah, well, I think we've gotten into the problems of wokeness a lot. I want to talk about some of the solutions that you talk about in the book, because I think some of these are really, really practical, that anybody could do them. One of them you talk about is, gardening, actually getting outside. And how can gardening combat wokeness?
Gardening is so great. I think if everybody had a garden in America or in the world, basically all of our problems would go away. Obviously, that's a simplification, but there's so much good that happens in gardening, and it's simple, it's inexpensive. You don't have to have a lot of property. You can even live in a city, go to a community garden. You can even, I don't know, have a few plants on your windowsill, something like that. So, what I love about gardening, the UK, their National Health Institute. I forget the exact name, but basically their health organization of the country. I put out a statement a couple years ago saying that their doctors were overwhelmed by the mental health crisis, and they were pleading with doctors to prescribe gardening to
Hmm.
people who came to them. So that's how therapeutic it is. What I love about gardening is, first and foremost, it gets you away from your phone, it gets you away from the screens, it gets you away from the wokeness. So you're not agitated. It's very peaceful. It distracts you. I'm a big fan of chores and puttering. Just doing things with your hands is so therapeutic. It makes you more fully alive. I think that's another problem that we have, is that um, as we spoke about at the beginning, our lives are so luxurious and easy now that you have all of your needs taken care of and then some. And then what do you have to do? Oh, you just think about yourself. You think about, what more could I have? Oh, maybe, I have all these wonderful things. My life is pretty great, but I still feel empty inside. Maybe I should try to take my neighbor's stuff. So if you're gardening, you're not thinking of those things. You're focused on what's
Hmm.
right in front of you. Pretty much any project, especially that gets you outside and uses your hands, is so great. You can involve your family. You're producing something, you're growing something, you are being in touch with nature, you're getting exercise, fresh air, sunshine. You it's so wonderful. And then you have healthy food at the end of the day, and you have this great feeling of satisfaction, because you did something to make yourself more self-sufficient. And the other great thing about being self-sufficient, is that you are not funding woke corporations. So you get rid of a
Hmm.
little bit of that woke coercion that we see going on in our shampoo bottles and everywhere else. So there's lots of wokeness at the grocery store, unfortunately. But if you can grow some of your own food, it's a great feeling. It's good for the environment. It's good for you. It's good for your soul. It's the best.
I agree with you. I love gardening, and I think it's a great point that you get to see the results of what you're doing, because I do think we have a lack of like people seeing progress in their lives. Like so many of these jobs that people have today working for a corporation where it's just monotonous, same thing every day. You're staring at a computer screen, you're talking to the same people, you're encountering the same problems. It's just like Groundhog Day over and over again. And something as simple as having a garden where you're going to see the seed sprout, you're going to see the plant get bigger, you're going to see little buds come off, you're going to see flowers, you're going to see the fruit start to grow, then get bigger and bigger, then you get to harvest it and enjoy it. I mean, the whole process is fantastic. So I'm totally on board with you with gardening. Plus, it's good for your gut health. A lot of people don't know this, but digging around in dirt, it's very important for our microbiome. And there is research out there that one of the contributing factors, maybe to all the allergies kids have today and other autoimmune issues, might be linked to the lack of kids playing in dirt, since they're on screen so much, not getting outside, getting dirty. So,
I've heard
um,
that. Yeah, that everything is so over sanitized now.
mhm.
Um, it's funny. So many of the tips I give in the book, they seem, it's nothing like new that I invented, like one weird trick or anything. It's just like, guys, let's get back to this. Remember how good this was for us? And then these scientists do these studies, and it like turns out gardening's good for you. And I'm like, well, people have been doing that for like thousands and thousands of years, and now we all of a sudden we figured out that, oh, what do you know? It has all these benefits, and that's so true of many things. I cite a study in there that they did a study on the value of tiny interactions. So that little chit chat that you have with the checkout person at the grocery store,
Mm.
and then you say hi to the person with the cute dog on your walk back to your car. Those little things add up and improve your mental health. And it's kind of sad that we have to do these studies, but it's also really fascinating. It's like these things that should come naturally but don't anymore are so good for us. And then by realizing how good they are for you, we're realizing how much we're missing out on and how much we're losing as we stop doing them. So yeah, if we get back to normal life, like what life was like before we were all so consumed in the woke war all the time, it would really do so much for society.
Yeah, that's a great point with the masks. Talking about, or you didn't say masks. I was thinking of masks. You're talking about small conversations and just smiling at someone. And we had that barrier for, what was it, like 18 months, 2 years, where we couldn't do that. And kids were growing up in schools where they'll have a mask, their teacher wearing a mask, all their friends were wearing masks, and they didn't learn how to read each other's faces. But yeah, you can change someone's day just by smiling at them. And
Yeah.
it's so impactful and so important. And we had the science saying at the time, well, there's no downside to wearing a mask, no downside at all. But
Mhm.
obviously there was. Anybody with the brain could have realized that there was a huge downside to blocking everyone's face from everyone else. But we're going to get to the bonus show. On the bonus show, I want to talk about just some other things about you so the audience can get to know you better. Also want to get your opinions on boycotting, on Bud Light, things like that. But before we get to the bonus, can you tell people where they can follow you on socials and where and how they can get your book?
I actually don't really do social media. I do have a Facebook account for my job, but that's about it. I don't really, I'm not a big fan of social media. So, sorry. You guys could, I don't know, email me or write me snail mail. I am a big advocate of that in the book. But you can buy my book at sophiainstitute.com. Sophia Institute Press is the publisher. It will also be available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, places like that where you can buy books. But I encourage people to get it from Sophia Institute if you can, because they're definitely not woke.
Awesome. Teresa, thank you so much for coming on Finding Freedom.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for tuning in for today's episode with Teresa Mull. Really awesome conversation. Really enjoyed getting to speak with Teresa. Think that she brings a unique approach, really, to dealing with this this woke pandemic that we are engulfed by. It is so easy to get totally, really obsessed with counteracting the onslaught of wokeness, be it via social media or what you see on the television, on cable news. The approach to actually, instead of trying to respond to everything and trying to consume all the content that is trying to counter it, the response to actually take a step back and step away from it and work on yourself, work on your family, work on your garden, I think is excellent advice. And I hope that people listen to this and take it. If this is your first time listening to this show, please consider subscribing. You can subscribe on any podcasting app, and a good one to subscribe on is the one you're listening on right now. It's very easy. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, there's a little plus sign. You just kind of put your finger sideways and hit that button, and we greatly appreciate the support. Of course, by subscribing, you'll get my show every Monday, Finding Freedom. Every Wednesday, you get Brian McWilliams with Mean Age Daydream. And every Friday, most of the time, we do a show called Meme Wars, where it's looking at current events, memes, things going on with Brian and I, talking about it in a comedic way, relaxed way to set you on your way into the weekend. And of course, we'd love to have you in our community, the Lions of Liberty Pride. Of course, you can join that by going to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty or lionsofliberty.locals.com. And next week, I will have another great episode for you with an awesome guest. Really looking forward to you hearing that and sharing that with you. So I will see you all next week. Everyone be safe. Have a great week. And always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.